I never imagined I'd be telling this story. Not in my worst nightmares. My life was good. Stable. Happy. Or at least I thought it was. My wife and I had been together for over 10 years. Married for almost 7. 2 young boys. A house full of noise, routines, small projects, plans for the future. No dramatic fights. No separations. No signs, at least none I wanted to see. For me, it was bliss. Real, boring, beautiful family life. Then everything caught fire. It started quietly. Subtly. The kind of changes you explain away because you trust the person next to you more than your own instincts. My wife took a new job at a highly respected care facility. A senior role. Big responsibility. She was proud, and I was proud of her. She talked a lot about her boss. How successful he was. How family-oriented. How much he believed in her potential. I didn't think much of it at first. People talk about work. That's normal. But over time, things felt off. She started going out more with coworkers. Dinners. Drinks. Golf events. Fundraisers. Nothing outrageous on its own. But then came the first night that really unsettled me. She went out after a work event and told me she'd be home in about an hour. 1 hour passed. Then 2. Then 3. Her phone went straight to voicemail. We share locations, mostly because we have kids and it's just easier. Her location showed her stopped on the side of a busy road, nowhere near where she said she was. I panicked. I thought she'd been in an accident. I was seconds away from calling the police when she finally called back, calm, saying her phone had died and she'd been in a coworker's car without a charger. The explanation made sense. Mostly. I told myself I was overreacting. New job. New people. New dynamics. Still, something about it stuck with me. She had never disappeared like that before. Ever. Not long after, she became obsessed with her appearance. Working out constantly. Watching her weight. Talking about cosmetic changes she never cared about before. Spending more and more time getting ready. She was already fit, already beautiful. It felt unnecessary. And yet, there it was. Then I finally met her boss. She invited a few coworkers over one afternoon after a race they'd run together. I was actually glad. I wanted to put a face to the name of this guy I'd heard so much about. When he arrived, my stomach dropped. He was older. Almost 60. Handsome in a polished, aging way. But incredibly awkward. He barely looked at me. His handshake was clammy, his eyes darting everywhere except my face. He stayed quiet, drank a beer, and left quickly. My intuition screamed. That same night, my wife decided last minute to go out to celebrate a friend's birthday. She dressed up, looked incredible, kissed me goodbye, and said she wouldn't be out long. Less than an hour later, I checked her location, just to make sure she arrived safely. She hadn't gone east to the bar. She was parked at her workplace. Not even her main building. A separate, tucked-away building across the street. Somewhere she'd never mentioned working. My mind raced. Did she turn around? Did she need to make a call? Was this some weird coincidence? She came home shortly after. Overly cheerful. Overly affectionate. She told me how much she loved me. We slept together. I remember lying there afterward, a horrifying thought flashing through my mind. What if she had just been with someone else? I pushed it away. I wanted to believe her. I needed to. Weeks passed. I buried the unease. Life continued. Our kids went to summer camp, at her workplace. Sometimes her coworkers watched them briefly if schedules got hectic. Including her boss. The kids talked about him casually. He gave them snacks. Let them play on his computer. I told myself it was harmless. Supportive workplace. A team that cared. Then came the hotel. We went on a beach vacation with her family. Sun, bike rides, normal family stuff. When we got back, she asked me to pick up the kids midweek so she could go out with coworkers. That alone felt strange. It was our oldest son's first day of kindergarten. A huge milestone. She chose work drinks over being there. She said one of her female coworkers was going through a rough divorce and had booked a hotel nearby. They were going to golf, then get dinner and watch football. My wife mentioned she might meet her at the hotel beforehand to talk. I didn't argue. I didn't want to be controlling. I agreed to pick up the kids, even though it meant leaving work early and driving out of my way. That afternoon, everything went wrong. Traffic. Construction. Delays. I was late. I tried calling my wife to tell her. She didn't answer. I checked her location. She was at the hotel. My chest tightened. My hands shook on the steering wheel. I tried to reason with myself. Maybe the coworker was there. Maybe it was just the bar. Maybe I was losing my mind. Then her location started moving. She was leaving. And by some cruel coincidence of timing and roads, as I merged onto the highway, she drove past me in the opposite direction. I didn't see who was with her. I picked up my kids late, heart pounding, pretending everything was normal. That night, we FaceTimed her at the bar. For a moment, I felt relief. Then one of my sons asked where that guy was, the one who gave them snacks. The camera turned. There he was. Smiling. Waving. I felt sick. And still. I said nothing. I didn't know it yet, but my life was already over. After that night, something inside me broke, but quietly. I didn't confront her. I didn't accuse. I didn't even ask questions that mattered. I told myself I needed proof, or certainty, or the right moment. In reality, I was afraid. Afraid of being wrong. Afraid of being right. She became more distant after the vacation. Not cold exactly, just selective. Warm when it suited her. Absent when it didn't. She still laughed with me, still shared memes, still curled up on the couch under the same blanket. But intimacy felt different. Mechanical. Sometimes non-existent. And when I tried to reach for her emotionally or physically, there was an invisible wall I couldn't cross. My gut screamed that she was already gone. Then came the night everything finally exploded. She told me she was going to a girls' night. Just dinner and drinks. Nothing unusual. Hours passed. I checked her location, not to spy, I told myself, just to ease my anxiety. She wasn't at a restaurant. She was sitting in a parking lot. Not moving. My heart dropped. I called her. No answer. I texted. Nothing. I called again. Straight to voicemail. I felt that same panic I'd felt months earlier. The sick certainty that something was very, very wrong. I called a close friend who lived nearby and asked him to drive past the location. I didn't even say why. I just said I needed him to check on her. Minutes later, my phone rang. She's in a car, he said. With a guy. I remember sitting down on the floor. I couldn't breathe. I asked him to describe the man. When he did, I knew. It was him. The ex. The one from her past. The one who had already shattered her once before we ever met. She came home shortly after. She didn't deny it. She said seeing him at a funeral weeks earlier had stirred something in her. Old emotions. Old trauma. A sense of being pulled back into a version of herself she never fully healed from. She said they'd been talking. That night, they kissed. She cried. I cried. She said she was confused. I said I was broken. And still, somehow, I stayed. That was when she finally entered therapy, real therapy. Trauma therapy. EMDR. For the first time in her life, she started unpacking the sexual abuse she endured as a child. 3 different abusers. 3 different family members. Years of silence. Years of shame. Years of being the sweet one, the quiet one, the agreeable one. As she healed, more truth came out. About her resentment toward her family. About how powerless she'd felt her whole life. About how, in our marriage, my frustration around intimacy made her feel like her only value was her body. Like sex was something she owed rather than something she chose. Hearing that crushed me. I began to understand how deeply I'd failed her, not by wanting intimacy, but by not understanding what intimacy cost her. How every expectation felt like pressure. How every rejection from her side felt, to me, like abandonment, but to her, it felt like survival. I went to therapy too. I learned about trauma responses. About safety. About how desire dies when the nervous system is constantly on alert. I started to see our marriage through a lens I never had before. But healing isn't linear. Even as she worked through her trauma, she grew more detached from me. Divorce came up. Then disappeared. Then came up again. We lived in this strange in-between space, married, but not really. Together, but not moving forward. We still shared a bed. Still laughed. Still leaned on each other at the end of the day. Sometimes she'd rest her legs on mine while we watched TV. She'd ask my opinion on her clothes, her nails. She'd tell me she wore certain outfits because she knew I liked them. And yet, she told me clearly, none of it meant she wanted to reconcile. I told her I wasn't leaving. That I loved her. That I believed her healing mattered more than timelines or ultimatums. I thought staying was an act of loyalty. Of faith. Of love. I didn't know I was standing on a fault line. Because a year after the first betrayal, I crossed a line of my own. I read her journal. And what I found shattered whatever illusion I still had left. I knew reading her journal was wrong the moment I touched it. I'd never done anything like that before. In all the years we'd been together, I'd never felt the urge to invade her privacy like that. But something in me was screaming that I was being lied to again. And this time, I wasn't strong enough to ignore it. I told myself I'd just glance. 1 page. 1 line. Enough to calm the panic. That's not what happened. What I read confirmed every fear I'd been trying to bury. She wasn't just talking to him again. She'd been seeing him. Over and over. And this time, it hadn't stopped at kissing. They'd been sleeping together for the past 2 months. I remember closing the journal and just sitting there in silence. No shaking. No yelling. Just this hollow feeling, like the air had been sucked out of the room. But what hurt the most wasn't just the affair. It was the way she wrote about it. She described feeling unable to say no. About giving him what he wanted because he asked. About how tied she felt to him. One entry mentioned she was on her period and couldn't give him what he wanted, as if her body was something owed, something transactional. Reading those words broke me in a completely different way. This was the exact dynamic she'd been trying to heal from in therapy. The exact pattern of powerlessness and self-erasure born from her trauma. And yet she was back in it. With the same man. The same cycle. I didn't confront her right away. I didn't know how. Part of me wanted to scream. Another part of me just felt deep, aching sadness, for her, for us, for our kids. When I finally told her I knew, her reaction wasn't anger about being caught. It was devastation that I'd read her journal. She told me it was the last place she felt safe. The one space where she could be fully honest without fear of judgment or consequences. And she was right. I had violated that. No matter what I found, that line couldn't be uncrossed. I apologized. Sincerely. Not as a defense. Not as an excuse. Just regret. But the truth was already out. I told her I couldn't stay in the house if she continued seeing him. Not as a threat. Not as an ultimatum. Just a boundary. I asked her what she wanted me to do. She said she didn't know. I asked if she'd be happier if I moved out. She said yes. That answer stayed with me. Heavy. Final. Even though nothing else felt certain. And still, despite everything, I didn't feel anger toward her the way I thought I would. What I felt was fear. Fear that she was spiraling again. Fear that she was tying herself to someone who didn't see her as a person, but as a place to take from. She'd already tried to end her life twice during this year. Hospitalizations. Medication changes. Sleepless nights. I kept thinking, what happens if I leave? What happens if I'm not there? So I stood in the middle of the wreckage, torn between self-respect and protection. Between walking away from betrayal and staying for someone who felt dangerously fragile. I didn't know which choice would destroy me less. That night, I didn't sleep. Instead, I wrote her a letter. And in that letter, everything finally became real. I stayed awake until morning, rewriting the same letter over and over again. Every version sounded too harsh, too weak, too emotional, or not honest enough. I wasn't trying to convince her to stay. I wasn't trying to save the marriage with words. I was trying to say the truth without causing more damage. When I finally gave it to her, my hands were shaking. I told her I understood now how my behavior in our marriage had contributed to her detachment. How my expectations around intimacy, and my failure to truly protect her emotional safety, had left scars I hadn't seen before. I took responsibility for that, without defending myself, without asking for forgiveness. But I also told her I had boundaries. I told her I couldn't remain in the house while she continued any kind of relationship with him. Not because I wanted to control her, and not because I expected her to choose me, but because staying in that situation was destroying me. I made it clear this wasn't an ultimatum. I wasn't demanding commitment. I wasn't pretending reconciliation was on the table right now. I was simply choosing to move forward, even if that meant separation. I asked her to be honest with herself and with her therapist. To really examine why she felt pulled toward the same man who had already hurt her, who still didn't treat her as someone worthy of love, safety, or respect, especially as a mother. I told her I loved her. And I told her she couldn't keep doing this. To herself. To me. To our family. To our kids. She read the letter quietly. No tears. No anger. Just this exhausted stillness. Later, she told me she wasn't willing to close the door on him. She admitted it wasn't a healthy situation, but said she wasn't ready to let it go. Something in me cracked when I heard that. Still, even then, I didn't lash out. Instead, we talked about logistics. About separation. About doing it through a mediator instead of lawyers, because despite everything, I didn't want to turn this into a war. We agreed on most of it quickly: money, time with the kids, living arrangements. That terrified me almost as much as it relieved me. It made everything feel inevitable. Before I left the room, I gave her a new journal. I told her I hoped she'd use it. That she deserved a place that was safe again. She took it without saying much. Now the house feels different. Not loud. Not chaotic. Just heavy. Like it's holding its breath. I still go to work. I still take care of the kids. I still clean the kitchen at night and fold laundry like nothing has changed. On the outside, I function just fine. But inside, I'm devastated. I don't know if I'm doing the right thing. I don't know if staying this long was love or fear. I don't know if leaving will finally protect me, or finish breaking what's left. All I know is this. The woman I love is still here. And somehow, she's already gone. The strangest part is how quiet everything becomes after the decision is made. Not peaceful. Not calm. Just, muted. Like the world turns the volume down out of respect for what's ending. We don't fight. That surprises people when they hear the story. There's no screaming, no slammed doors, no dramatic confrontations. We move around each other carefully, like two people sharing space after a disaster, both aware that one wrong step could make everything collapse faster. She's gentler with me now. Not warmer, gentler. As if I'm something fragile she doesn't want to shatter any further. She asks how my day was. She thanks me for things she never used to notice. Sometimes she sits near me on the couch, close enough that our legs touch, but not close enough to mean anything. That's the hardest part. Those small, familiar gestures that once meant love now feel like echoes. Muscle memory. Habit without intention. At night, lying in the same bed, I stare at the ceiling and wonder how two people can be this close and this far apart at the same time. I wonder how long she's been grieving the end of us before I ever knew we were dying. I replay everything. The moments I pushed. The moments I didn't listen. The times she tried to tell me she was drowning and I handed her expectations instead of understanding. I own that. Fully. That weight is mine to carry. But then my mind drifts to the other truth, the one I'm not allowed to forget just because guilt is loud. She chose to cheat. She chose to go back. She chose to keep the door open, knowing exactly what it would cost. Both things can be true. And learning to hold that without breaking myself has been one of the hardest lessons of my life. The kids sense something. They always do. They ask why we're quieter. Why we don't laugh as much. Why mom seems tired in a different way. We tell them we're working through some things. We tell them they are safe. We tell them they are loved. And that part, at least, is true without conditions. Some days, I feel strong. Clear. Certain that separation is the only path that doesn't erase me entirely. Other days, I feel like I'm standing at the edge of something irreversible, wondering if love means staying even when it hurts, or finally choosing yourself when staying costs too much. I don't hate her. I'm not angry in the way people expect. I'm just unbearably sad. Sad that love wasn't enough. Sad that healing didn't come in time. Sad that the person I wanted to protect most became the one who hurt me the deepest. I don't know what comes next. I just know that whatever happens, I can't disappear inside someone else's pain anymore. And for the first time in a long while, that realization feels less like betrayal. And more like survival. Acceptance doesn't arrive like clarity, it arrives like exhaustion. One morning I wake up and realize I'm tired of negotiating with reality, tired of asking the same questions that never get honest answers. I stop trying to understand why and start asking what now, and that shift, small as it is, feels like oxygen. For the first time, I'm not choosing pain or forgiveness or separation, I'm choosing to stay present, one day at a time, until the fog lifts enough to see where my feet actually want to go. Acceptance doesn't arrive like clarity. It arrives like exhaustion. One morning I wake up and realize I'm tired of negotiating with reality, tired of asking the same questions that never get honest answers. I stop trying to understand why and start asking what now, and that shift, small as it is, feels like oxygen. For the first time, I'm not choosing pain or forgiveness or separation, I'm choosing to stay present, one day at a time, until the fog lifts enough to see where my feet actually want to go.